Here we go. So hi everyone. Thank you for being in the room today for attending this webinar. So before we start the webinar, and just to make sure that we wait for additional people, I do have one question for you. Where are you in the world right now? Ireland. Any other country? Canada. Okay. France, Canada, Germany, Canada, India. Awesome. Okay. Well, thanks a lot for sharing that with us. And that's really one of the advantages of doing this kind of events completely online. Okay, so let's start. So we have 1 hour together today. So I'm here. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Strapi. So our mission at Strapi is to empower millions of people to manage any content anywhere. With more than 50,000 stars on GitHub and more than 8 million downloads, Strapi became by far the most popular open source headless CMS. So Strapi is that's really what makes Strapi so unique, that it's a headless content management system, so you can manage content on any platform, and it's open source. So that means that it's fully customizable. You can contribute to the project. There is a very large community of users, so if you have any question, you can make sure that you will find an answer. And it's open source, so you can host it on any cloud. So I'm extremely excited to welcome two amazing people from Conscia. Jason Yen as a head of customer solutions at Conscia, and Sana Remekie, co-founder and CEO at Conscia. So today we'll talk about the benefits of personalized content. And before we dig into this topic, Jason and Sana, could you introduce both yourself and explain what Conscia is?
Yep, sure. So Sana Remekie, as you can see on the screen, CEO and co-founder of Conscia. We're really an experience orchestration platform for a composable tech stack, as a lot of organizations are starting to move away from the monolith and all-in-one suites towards more headless and composable architectures. We essentially act as the intelligence layer for marketing, so that they can orchestrate who sees what content on what channel, on what device, etc. And that's something that we'll dive a lot deeper into in the rest of this webinar. Jason?
Hey everybody, I'm Jason Yen, and I'm head of customer solutions. And so I'll be taking you through the demo during our presentation today. And so I look forward to any questions that you may have.
Thank you. So over the past years, headless content management systems became very popular. The content has not only to be displayed on websites, but also on mobile applications, IoT. We see so many use cases from our users and customers. And even the way to create a website completely changed over the past few years, because developers want to use modern front-end frameworks such as React or Vue.js, so they can build much faster websites, which results in better conversion, better SEO, and just a better user experience. So the issue is that traditional CMSs are not designed for these new use cases, because all of these new use cases, all of these new technologies require an API to expose the content to all of these platforms, so you can manage the content once and display it on any platform. And so for all of these reasons, we created Strapi in 2015. At the time, we were students working as freelance developers, and we really felt that pain as developers. And now it's really no-brainer that headless is really the future of content management. But the issue is also that legacy stacks included not only content management systems, but also DXPs, which stands for Digital Experience Platform. Sana, could you give us more color on what is a DXP?
It's really, it stands for Digital Experience Platform. And as you said, content is, of course, core to the experience. There's no doubt about that. But the DXPs of the past and the present, some incumbent ones, such as, let's say Sitecore or Adobe, etc., they provide something a little bit more than just the ability to manage and deliver content. They also provide marketing teams the ability to personalize the content or A/B test or experiment with different types of variants of the content. They provide analytics dashboards for marketers to see how that content is performing. Now, the biggest issue with the monolith or all-in-one DXPs is that they are mostly restricted to web and maybe they go as far as mobile. But the reason why headless CMSs came into play is so that you can create content for all channels, all touch points, all devices. And so these DXPs, although they have a lot of this capability for personalization and optimization, et cetera, they don't really do that for all of the channels. So as the organizations shift from the monolithic DXPs to build their own composable tech stacks, they of course have found their home in a headless CMS, but now a lot of the organizations are wondering, how do we get to the same capability that we used to have with a web-focused DXP across the board? So we want to offer all types of channels, all types of devices, all kinds of experiences everywhere, but we want to also have the same capability that we used to have that was focused just on the web before.
Okay, thanks a lot, Sana, for explaining what a DXP is. It looks like DXP is kind of the superpower of content management systems. How do you summarize the benefits of personalizing and optimizing the content? Because you could say, well, content is fine, but it looks like there are some benefits of personalizing it and optimizing that content.
Yeah, so I mean, I think as a customer, when I move from one device to another, and as I interact with a brand, I expect that the brand understands why. What am I doing? What's my intention? What am I looking for? Right. So for a very simple example of this would be, I'm on a, with COVID, a lot of people were ordering their groceries online, right? So they go on a grocery website, they pick a bunch of items that they want to add to their cart, they go and pick those items up. Now, most people have certain habits of buying certain types of products on an ongoing basis. So every 2 weeks or every 4 weeks, you know that this person's probably going to look for bananas, right? Or maybe every week. So, if a grocery store retailer can predict that this is what this customer is probably going to need next, they can contextualize that experience for that customer so that they offer the right products to them at the right time within their customer journey, right? And that journey connects not just the web, or it's not just limited to the web. It's when you are at the POS, the person cashing you out should know, this is what you purchased last time. This is maybe something that you've forgotten, right? So that's really a value that you're adding to the customer. It's not just to sell your products and just reach a larger audience. It's to really make those experiences relevant to the customer so that it removes the friction from the purchase experience, from that entire customer journey. So that's, I think, the big benefit really of personalization.
Okay, thank you, Sana. Well, I think it's not even a debate. These platforms are extremely valuable for companies to actually make the most of their content. And well, we talk a lot about composability these days, and well, just by definition, headless CMS is based on an API, and it's never used alone. At least there is a front end, the client, to pull that content and display it, no matter if it is a website or a mobile application, and the content of this CMS has to be synchronized with search engine like Algolia. Companies also use e-commerce CMSs, data management platform, and so on and so on. So composability is everywhere these days. So in this new modern architecture, so if we consider that the headless CMS is the body of the website, and the front end is actually the head, my question is, where does the DXP sit today?
So I would say, and I would argue, and that's how we've been positioning Conscia, I would call us the brain of the overall composable stack. So the brain is where the intelligence lies. The brain is what is able to orchestrate experiences across multiple devices, across multiple channels. It has the awareness of what are all of the various backend systems of record, systems that contain data, content, and logic, so that I can orchestrate an experience that is relevant to the customer. So showing the right content to the right customer at the right time is the task of the brain, right? So that is what Conscia really is in this mix.
Okay. Thank you, Sarah. I love that analogy. It's always good to do a bit of anatomy to explain where things sit. Thank you.
Exactly. And I think, well, one other, I guess, comment that I would add to all of this is when we started talking about headless, we meant to say really faceless, right? It's the face, the touch point, the way you look at the experience. That could be anything, right? It could be your web, mobile. That's the screen. That's the display. So the word head really is composed of two things. It's not just the display. It's the display plus the brain. So when we went headless, what ended up happening is that we kind of forgot about the brain as well. And so what we're trying to do at this point is bring the brain back, still headless, but you still need the intelligence, right? So we're just breaking the stack down a little bit so that the back end is decoupled from the brain, and the brain is decoupled from the head as well. So everything is decoupled. We just don't want to forget that you do need intelligence. You do need to be able to put the right content in front of the right person at the right time. And you can't just connect the back end to the front end without really thinking through how that intelligence is going to make its way into the experience. If you like, I could show a couple of slides here that that kind of show how we position ourselves and how we see the overall tech stack as well.
Sure. That would be awesome. And just because we're talking about the body right now, I would say that, and I think that it's really important to highlight one of the main benefits of this new headless composable modern architecture is that you can decide what body you want for your project, what brain you want for your project, what face you want for your project. Compared to traditional CMS, traditional solutions where we have everything as a package, it might look good on paper because you get everything together, but your project has specific needs all the time. Every project is different, every company is different, every team is different. So every project needs different requirements. And the good thing about this composability is that you can decide what you want for each specific functionality, for each specific part of your project, of your body.
Yeah, so definitely that's a perfect way to contextualize what I was saying. So I think you should be able to see my screen at this point, and I just want to make sure that I'm able to move through the slides, and it looks like I can. Um, so the way we look at the overall experience is that experience is broken down into three component parts. You have your customer, who is someone that you need to display the experience to. You have your content, and we have a large or broad sense of broad definition of what content really is. Content could be a blog article that you're showing to the customer, or it could be a video, or it could be an image. It could even be a product coming from a commerce engine. Or sometimes products are even managed within CMSs, right? So it's really anything that you are displaying to the customer. And then you have the context of the customer in real time. And the context is really where exactly they are in the customer journey right now. Are they browsing on the website? Are they on their mobile phone? Where are they currently located? What page of the website they may be on? What they have in their cart? That is all real-time context about the customer. Just one second here. So the challenge is that the content, the customer data, as well as the context, they're all coming from a bunch of different places within a composable architecture. So content could be coming from legacy CMSs. It could be coming from a modern headless CMS like Strapi. It could be sitting in, commerce engines, promotion engines, a whole ton of different places. Same thing with the customer, right? You can learn about the customer from a lot of different sources. There is, CRMs in place. They may be entering information in a web form. They may be, interacting with customer service, and you may be capturing a lot of information about the customer on the website, right? So all of that data about the customer is scattered all over the place, and there are, initiatives in place in large organizations to pull all of that data together into something like a CDP, for instance. And so that's a reality that we're really living in. And same thing with the context, as I said, it could be whatever the customer is doing in the current moment and what their current intent may be. So we know for certain that the future is composable, and you said it perfectly earlier, Pierre. That's the world we're living in. That's a world that we're moving towards, right? So So if that's the case, what is exactly so difficult about composability and being headless? What's missing, right? So this is the current state of composable architecture today, where you have a bunch of backend services or systems of record holding data and content, like we mentioned earlier, and you have a presentation layer that connects to those backend systems through some API, right? So the challenge that has come up as organizations move from monolithic architectures to headless architectures is the logic for what the customer should see, where and when, is now embedded into your front end, right? And that front end, for the most part, is being managed by developers and not marketers anymore, right? So that's the gap that that basically happened as we moved from monolith to composable. So if you look at the DXP, the old world, and the way really things should be done is that you have three layers of any tech stack or a digital experience stack that we're speaking about here. You have your data and content, right? Typically, you have what we used to call a business logic layer, right? And that is the decisioning layer. And then you have delivery, and delivery could, in a headless and composable world, delivery could be on any touch point whatsoever. So yes, we have the data and we have the delivery, but we lost decisioning in the middle, right? So that is where Conscia comes into play, right? So we are basically bringing back the decisioning layer into the composable tech stack, and giving marketers the control to manage the experience in that decisioning layer, right? So that's exactly why, going back to the analogy, Conscia is the brain that makes those decisions or helps marketers make those decisions within a composable tech stack. Does that make sense? Awesome.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen now because I think I talked too much already. And if you have more questions, we can, definitely answer those or move to the next step.
Yeah, and speaking of questions, feel free to ask questions now. We'll go through all of them at the end of the webinar. So you can start posting them, and we'll make sure that we answer. So we clarified why headless CMSs became the norm. We defined the benefits of digital experience platforms, and we explained how these functionalities are actually even more relevant in a modern headless architecture. So you probably wonder what it looks like in reality. So Jason, could you share your screen and go through a quick demo of Conscia and Strapi?
Yeah, no problem. Okay,
Thank
so
you.
what I want to do is for this demo, we've created, and I'm just going to pause this so it's not super distracting. So for this demo, we've created a sample web experience based off of a CPG luxury brand that runs frequent campaigns in the form of a landing page, like you see in front of you. Now, what I'm going to show you is I'm going to show you how to personalize this experience using the customer's context to orchestrate content from Strapi. Now, for this particular campaign, as I scrolled through this, you'll notice that it's recreational based. And so this page is actually built up of a series of different components. And so we have a component like this, which is an announcement component. We have hero video, which is another component. And as we scroll down, you'll notice that each of these components is pulling content from Strapi. And I'll show you a couple examples of that later. So here's an A/B test component. As I scroll through these pictures and text, these little, what I call tiles, these are all one component, okay? And finally, at the end of the page, we have a component for stories. So this is basically sourcing a series of different content articles from Strapi. And so you'll notice that there's this little floating customer context card. And I'll show you how we change the different experiences by looking at the customer's context. And what we're going to be doing is when the customer's context is available, it's going to appear in this box, okay? And so the end result is that we're using the same page, but we're ending up with a personalized experience, which is centered around a collaboration with a customer's favorite brand, okay? So jumping to the next page. So again, this is the same page. And what we're going to do here is we're passing in an email address. And what's happening is this is looking up the customer's context in Conscia's own lightweight CDP. And the context is available here. So you can see that this is Mr. Quill. He is a traveler segment. He loves DJ Oasis, and he's located in the USA. So what's happening is the Conscia's digital experience engine uses this context to then source the right content from Strapi. So here you can see that because Quill is in the USA, the announcement is now personalized to his location. The hero video is now personalized to his brand affinity. And as I scroll down, you can see that the tiles where we used to have recreational tiles, these are all tiles now for this fictional DJ Oasis. Okay. And just coming down to the bottom, the stories that are available for Quill is all around kind of sneakers and sneaker customization and unboxing. Okay, so that's just one example of personalization, and I'll show you another example. So here again, it's the same page. What we're doing is we're simply just passing in a different customer profile and the customer email, and that customer email is then used to go get the customer's context. And again, because Thor is a fitness, within the fitness segment, has an affinity for Adidas and is located in the UK, all of the content that we're sourcing from Strapi is now being updated to reflect that context. So here we have a promotion based on bank holidays. You can see that the hero video is now showcasing a collaboration between Adidas and Lex. And as we scroll down, you can see that all of the tiles that are showcased are now evolved around kind of the Adidas brand and fitness. And then coming towards the end of our stories, previously with Quill's experience, where we are seeing sneaker customization, we're now seeing more fitness-related articles. Okay. So again, what's happening here for kind of these three examples I showed you is that Conscia's digital experience engine is using the context that's being provided to it and using that to go fetch content from Strapi. Now, this is the customer experience point of view, and I'll just hand it over to Pierre for a little bit, just to show us the experience from a marketer point of view. So Pierre, if you can just show us kind of how things are set up in Strapi.
Yeah, of course. So this is Strapi. So this is where you're going to be able to manage all of your content. So all of the tiles you see in the demo that Jason just made, all of that content is actually stored in Strapi. So you can benefit from all of the capabilities of powerful content management system. You can define a very specific content structure for your project. You can manage assets. You can also benefit from the plugins developed by the Strapi community. You can define who can do what in terms of content management. So all of these entries can easily be managed in Strapi, independently from the front end, independently from Conscia. And then you can, once everything is done, you can actually set up Conscia on top of Strapi. And Conscia will sit actually between the CMS and the front end to add more intelligence to how to display that content that is managed in Strapi.
I'm just going to add one comment to this as well. So, you know how, Pierre, you said Conscia sits in between the CMS and the front end. There are some personalization platforms that will actually go and update the CMS content directly to create a personalized experience. And they will do that by actually adding tags directly to the content. So we're against that approach. I would say quite violently against that approach, because and the reason for that is that you don't want to put your intelligence in one system of record, and you don't want to put that intelligence in a front end, like one specific front end either. You need to keep that intelligence layer abstracted away from both the back end and the front end, in a way that you can then scale across multiple systems of record and multiple front ends as well. And I think once Jason shows the Experience Studio within Conscia, that will become fairly clear exactly what we mean by that.
Okay, so similar to, so as you saw what Pierre showed you, I mean, Strapi has this beautiful, easy to use interface that's very marketer friendly. And as Pierre showed you, marketers have the ability to curate their content and tailor their workspace. Now, Conscia has the Experience Studio, which is what you see in front of you, and it's designed for marketers in mind as well. It's meant to be simple and intuitive. Now, the page that you see in front of you is the experience components, and this is where we basically configure our components that source content from Strapi. Now, here you can see that there's a couple of different components that we've created in order to build out that page that I showed you earlier. And there's a couple of different types of components, and I'll walk you through the different types. There's basically A/B, there's static, and there's dynamic. And as we go through the next screen, that'll become more relevant as to what the differences are. Okay, so if I just look at one of the components, here we'll look at a promotional A/B component. Here you can see that we've defined the component type. And again, this is a static record. And a static record is basically where we are looking at Strapi and picking specific records. Okay. Now here, when we're setting up this component, the first thing we do is obviously set up a connection, which I won't show you here because that's pretty straightforward. But the second thing that we do is we basically bind it to a content type within Strapi or a collection type within Strapi. So for this particular example, this component is bound to the campaign promo collection type that Pierre showed you earlier. Okay, and once we have that, there's two additional pieces of configuration where you can define which attribute within the collection you want to search on. So here I'm searching for title and name, and you can basically add any of the additional fields that appear as part of that collection type. And so just to make things a bit more user-friendly, we have this display type here. And what happens here is when you're looking for record, you can basically define this template, and this template renders, it basically dictates how that record renders out. And I'll show that to you in the next step. Okay, so moving on to the experience rules page. So this page is where components are, the components that we just created are assigned to templates, and templates are in turn assigned to channels. And so on this experience rules page, this is where you can see the hierarchy between the channels, the templates, and the components. Here for this demo, we set up a web channel, a kiosk channel, and a mobile app channel. And so within each of those, you have templates. And so the template that we were looking at on the front end earlier was the campaign page. Okay. And so here you can see when I expand that out, I can see all of the different components that were part of that template. And here were the components from Strapi, and we had that hero video from a CDP. And then we also have a component that's basically going and sourcing the context when we pass in the email address. Now, one of the things that's kind of the value prop of Conscia is that components can be shared across different templates. So an example of that is this component, which returns a promo section on the page, can be shared across, say, this splash page on a kiosk. Okay, and likewise, template pages can actually be shared across channels. So here we have a template page on the web channel, but we're also using that template page on the kiosk. And so having this reusability / composability allows you to deliver a consistent experience across your channels. And not only that, but for each of the front ends on each of those respective channels, they no longer have to deal with the orchestration because Conscia is handling with it. And so that basically means development cost savings and a faster time to market. Now, I'll take you through some rules just to give you a sense of how the context is being used to drive those experiences. And so if we look at the campaign tiles, we'll look at this rule here. This is an experience rule, and the experience rule basically has three portions to it. The first portion is kind of like the definition. And within this portion, I can basically define a priority. So if this rule ever conflicts with another rule, whichever has the lowest priority will win. I can basically define a campaign code. So for any number of rules, I can basically assign the same campaign code. And so when we run analytics on that, all of those roll up to the same campaign code. And then I can basically assign this as a A/B test, which I'll show you an example of later. The second portion of this rule is the trigger condition. And as Senna mentioned, we don't believe in tagging content to then activate something. So here what you can actually do is activate based on a time frame or activate based on context. And in this case, this is the these are the tiles that we're showing when we were looking at Quill's profile. And because Quill had a brand affinity for DJ Oasis, this is what causes this rule to fire. And so when we look at this, this canvas, what you can actually do is you can start to then build these criteria and look at any number of different customer contexts that we know of, and start to say look at someone who's in Canada, because we have a lot of folks from Canada on the line. And you can start to build this criteria that says anybody who fits this criteria, this is who I want to personalize the content for. And this third portion here is the personalized content that we're returning. Okay, so here we had showed the DJ Oasis plus kind of a music meets fashion culture, and these are all records being sourced from Strapi. And so here, if I look for something like sports, here's records from Strapi, and here that template, the display template, this is where it kind of comes into effect, where we can basically shape what the record looks like coming from Strapi. Okay. So this is an example of a static connector where we're picking the actual records. And I will show you an example of a dynamic connector. And so a dynamic connector, if you recall, is what's actually feeding this section here. Okay. And so here, if I look at, say, this guy, a dynamic connector activates in the same way, where we have a trigger condition, which is either a start and end date or a real-time context, or a combination of both. But where it differs is, instead of picking a specific record, we're actually defining a criteria. So in this case, what we're doing is we're saying, give me any article that contains workout, that contains or contains balance, or contains shoes and size. And again, what you can do is you can basically use this canvas to start to build, to drag and drop a criteria that is going to define what records should come back as part of this rule. Okay.
I'll just add something quick here as well. So this dynamic criteria builder is actually going directly against Strapi's APIs. Okay, so Strapi exposes the ability to create these filtered set of records. And we're essentially taking those APIs and putting a business user front end to it. So in real time, when a call comes into Conscia, we are using this query that we've created using the Strapi APIs and making a call directly to Strapi. So we're not pulling in any content, we're not copying any content from Strapi into Conscia. We're going directly to Strapi to get that content. And that's one of the issues as well in some of the other personalization engines that work with headless CMSs is that they have these very complex integrations with the headless CMSs where you have to sync all of the content first into the personalization engine, or in many cases, even create content in the personalization engine directly, which sort of defeats the point of having a structured headless CMS behind the scenes.
Yeah, thanks, Dana.
Yeah,
Essentially,
exactly.
there's no lifting and shifting of information.
Mm-hmm. So important to have one single source of truth. So you make sure that as a content editor, everything in the same place.
Exactly.
Otherwise, you end having content here and there, and you
right.
don't even know where the content is coming from. So
Exactly.
making sure that everything in the CMS and defining rules on top of that is definitely the best way to structure the content.
Yeah, exactly. So I had showed you an example of a static component connected to Strapi and a dynamic one. Now, the last one I want to show you is basically the A/B test component. And this is for organizations who are looking to get into, say, optimization or experimentation. And so here, again, this is the same page. And you can see that the email subscription promo area has two different variants. There's the subscribe to newsletter, and then there's a slightly longer version. Okay, and this is all driven by the same component, and I will show you what that looks like. So again, this is pulling information directly from Strapi, and this component is slightly different because it's an A/B test. And so as soon as you click enable A/B test, what happens is the target experience section basically morphs into something that allows you to define different variants. And so in this case, what we're doing is each of these variants, this being the first and this being the second, each of these variants has a relative weight. And because there's a relative weight of 1 and a relative weight of 1, what's happening is when customers visit the page, there's going to be a 50-50 split between who gets variant A and who gets variant B. And for each of these variants, we've defined a variant identifier. So when we go to do analytics, this identifier is passed kind of downstream through the analytics so that you could basically understand which of these variants is kind of working and which one's not. Now, again, the record is coming directly from Strapi. So if I wanted to pick a different record, I can basically go, and this is basically looking up Strapi, and I can basically pick it, and that's what renders this record as part of that front-end experience that you just saw. So in terms of, I briefly touched upon kind of the analytics, and I'll just show you something that is not part of this demo, but it's just something that we show you for from another demo. In terms of A/B testing, this is one of the dashboards that we have from another project where we're we have a module called Intel, and Intel basically looks at any insights that is being returned as part of the customer's behavior. Okay, and so for this particular report, this is centered around the A/B testing for this coffee lover promo. And here you can see that there were 3 different variants, and the information that's coming back from the Intel module is used to basically generate these reports for marketers and business users so that they can have a better understanding as to, is their content working? Where do they need to shift their decisions? Okay, so this gives you a sense of what the dashboards could look like, what are some of the analytics could look like. And for any project, this is typically customized for a customer. Okay, and with that, I will hand it back to Pierre for, I guess, questions and answers.
Yeah, thank you so much for this demo. It's really helped better understanding how all these tools fit together. So I can see that there are 3 questions in the chat. So let's start with the first one, which is from Anuj. So can you show us some benchmark implementations?
That's
Jason, is it something you have?
So it's, I think we've shown a typical implementation of what Conscia and Strapi together would look like. So I think this question was probably asked prior to us doing the demo. So maybe we can move to, actually, I like that the second question that Anuj is asking, maybe we can tackle that, and hopefully that will give everybody a better understanding of the data flow between the various systems. So I do have a slide for that I can pull up. Just give me 1 second over here. It just takes a little bit of time for some reason to, okay, there we go. So the data flow, I mean, the title, you can ignore it for a second. I'll get to why I have that title. But the idea is that this Conscia, which is over here, this circle over here, can be called using an API from any touch point or channel, right? So the touch points and channels are on the right-hand side. And when you call Conscia, what you're providing to it, to us, is the context of the customer, right? So the context could be something as simple as the customer ID, right? So customer ID that you want Conscia to basically look up in a CDP to bring back the right information about the customer. The current context, in this case, an example is they've just entered a search term. That's the real-time context of the customer. And as they say, search is usually one of the best indicators of the customer's real-time intent, right? So we know now that the customer is looking for a specific product. And then you're asking to bring back a specific template. And Jason walked us through the anatomy of channels, templates, and components. And a template could be shared across multiple channels, so can the components, right? So you're asking Conscia, this is what I want back in return. Now, Conscia then takes that query, parses it, and starts making calls to a bunch of different backend systems to aggregate a response for the front end, right? So we talked about the various components like featured products and blogs and search results and hero banners. Each of these components within the DX engine have rules associated to them that can be edited by marketing. So marketing's in control of the actual content that the customer is going to see. So the DX engine then starts to execute on each of these components that are part of the decisioning logic, right? So the first one it would do execute is the customer profile component, which is in this case connected to segment, right? So you could use any CDP really in the backend as long as there is an API, customer profile API that we're able to use to pull back important pieces of information about the customer, right? So in real time, we're going and grabbing things like the customer's segment or other attributes like brand affinity or anything that the CDP is able to pull together from all of the various sources that we talked about earlier as well. So at that point, Conscia gets the response from the CDP, pulls out the important pieces of information, without writing any code. So here we're not, doing a bunch of coding and customizations to connect to a very specific CDP to get the data that we need. Each component is configurable in a sense that you're only providing a JavaScript expression to pull from the response the pieces that you need. Now, those pieces that you got from, or that information that you got from Segment or any other CDP, is then added to the real-time customer context. Okay, so now not only is the customer context, the customer ID and search term, now each of these subsequent components are going to know that the customer belongs to this segment, the customer has this brand affinity, blah, 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 right? Now, each of these components, if you remember, were configured with the various contexts that we want to respond to. One of the contexts was brand affinity, another was location, another was device. So this doesn't change. This component doesn't change any of this, right? This is a completely independent component. All it's responsible to do is go and get the right information and then update the context, the real-time context of the customer. Once that's done, you execute the remaining components that, or the Conscia executes the remaining components that are dependent on that context. So again, the Conscia engine knows in what order it needs to go and execute all of this logic. It creates a dependency graph based on all of the rules that are in place, based on the definitions of the components and the way they interact with each other. And so in real time, Conscia knows that it needs to call this component first, then it calls 5 components in parallel, essentially, to go get the rest of the information, packages up all that information together in one response. So this is the API response with the landing page that somebody asked for, along with all of the pieces of data that we got or content that we got from the various backend systems, and we send it to the front end. One question that always gets asked as far as the data flow is concerned is, do we go in and modify the response that's coming from Strapi in this case, for example? And the answer is we can, but we typically don't. And typically we don't because you've already implemented a front end by making calls directly to Strapi, right? And we usually come in a little bit later once the first implementation is done. Sometimes we come at the same time as the CMS, but a lot of times it's after, right? So you've already built your experience on Strapi APIs. So we don't want to go and change the response that comes back from Strapi before handing it over to the front end, or you're going to have to do a bunch of rework on your front end code, right? So we're trying to keep it as simple as, pull content from all the different backend systems without modifying anything, just package it together based on rules, based on intelligence that marketing is configuring, essentially. So it's adding a thin layer in between your backend and your front end.
I think one thing this slide really speaks to is just the complexity that if you're dealing with, say, 5 channels, right? Without that experience API layer, you're basically doing all of this complex orchestration on every single channel, right? So if you want to expand to another channel, like many brands and organizations are, you have to replicate all of this complex activity for those new channels. With having that experience API layer, you don't have to worry about any of that, right? You simply just make one call, and that little box that says API request, that's a very simple call. So if tomorrow I expand to a kiosk, I don't have to do any orchestration. I simply just make a call, I pass the template code, and I get this pre-formatted payload, and all I need to do is just make that content look pretty on the front end. So it saves a lot of time, and it speeds things up.
Exactly. And the question was also about the database or databases. So there's actually only one database where the content is stored. It's actually the database that's used with Strapi. So the content is not stored in the middle. Not Conscia doesn't store the content, but only the rules, and really what all of this API requests, but the content is only stored in Strapi.
Right, exactly. That makes a lot of sense. There's another question here about based on what information or trigger do you place the person in a segment? So, there's two components to the Conscia platform. One is the decisioning engine that we're talking about here, the real-time orchestration, experience orchestration platform or engine that we're talking about in this slide. And then the second component is the DX graph, which has the ability to store customer information coming from whatever various different systems, as well as what you're passing to Conscia as the customer interacts with the brand. So there's a track API that collects that information, pushes it into the DX graph. That's our lightweight version of a CDP, or a single view of the customer. The segmentation of the customer into their various audiences is actually done in the DX graph, and we're not doing the demo of that particular component today. But if you were using Conscia as a CDP, this call over here, which is showing a connection to segment, instead you would be building that connection to Conscia's own DX graph there. They're very independent components of the overall Conscia platform. So we've built even the DX graph in a way that there is no coupling whatsoever between the DX graph and the DX engine, so they can work very independently from each other. But I hope that answers the question that you're asking here. What else do we have?
There was one question about the integration effort into a React mobile application. So no matter if it is a React mobile application or a React application or Vue.js application, the integration is very simple. So in the majority of use cases, you will actually connect the front end, so the mobile application or the website, probably directly to Strapi, at least at first. And as you iterate on your app or website, you will want to personalize some of the components, not necessarily all of them. So the reality that very often the front end will stay connected to Strapi itself, but for some specific component that you want to personalize, you will, instead of connecting to the Strapi API, you will actually connect your front end to the Conscia API for the specific components. But as Jason mentioned earlier, the structure that you will get from Conscia for the content will be exactly the same that the one that is coming from Strapi. So it doesn't change that much for you. It's just that you send the API request to Conscia with the context, and you get the exact same content structure that you would have get some from Strapi.
Exactly. I think that is it for the questions that we have.
Yeah, thank you for asking all of those questions. Any additional questions? Okay. Well, I think we're gonna be good for today. Well, we hope this webinar helps you better understand the benefits of personalized content, which is really about content plus context. So if you're interested in Strapi, give it a try by creating a project. You can also sign up for the Strapi Cloud waitlist. We're actively working on Strapi Cloud, which is going to be the managed version of Strapi, so it will be even easier to use Strapi with that product that will be on top of Strapi. So feel free to join the waitlist. Melanie, if you can share the link in the chat. And Sana, Jason, anything to share with the audience?
I would say not for me, but Sana publishes a lot of good content on social media that gives you direction around kind of this whole industry and where it's going. So definitely subscribe to Sana's LinkedIn. There's a lot of good content there.
Thank you. I didn't even think of saying that. But no,
Okay,
nothing for me. It was a pleasure to speak here on this webinar, and thank you, Pierre and Melanie, for inviting us to speak, to your audience. So really appreciate that.
Always a pleasure. Thanks to everyone who attended this webinar. We hope it was helpful. And thank you so much, Sana and Jason, for your insights. And we look forward to personalizing a lot of content together for
definitely
users and customers.
Thanks, Pierre.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye. Have a good day.